Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Second Act Actors. I'm your host, Dr. Janet McMorty, and I am still a medical doctor simultaneously trying to pursue a career in acting. My guest this week is Casey Walker. Casey is a filmmaker, meaning that he is a director and a producer and has been, honestly, from the start. He is behind some incredible Canadian productions: In a Violent Nature, The Void, Zaboomafoo, to name a few. Okay. If you're a millennial like me, you know Zaboomafoo, you know Kratz Creatures. If you're too young to know, go look it up. Again, the filmmaker behind The Void, executive producer of In a Violent Nature, which is one of the most terrifying movies I've ever seen, ever. He has an incredible story to tell, amazing advice for actors on how you can make the director and the producer's job easier. Please enjoy the incredibly talented and highly motivational Casey Walker. Okay, well, tell me your story. How did you get into this crazy business?
Ooh, I like to say that I lost a bet, but that's just a laugh. I think I always wanted to be in entertainment because from early age I was in theater and just performing in general. My parents would probably say I was just always on and animated, and a very active imagination, so that they encouraged a lot, which was awesome. So. Yeah, I had no idea how film and television was made, like even well into my like teens. I just like watch things and observe things, but like no idea what the process was. I think in film school I even asked my professor once, like, do they write the action sequences or do they like just make it up as they go? And then I went to school for drama and education and psychology, which I just the only thing I could think of was like, I'll just go be a teacher, but I thought I'd be a drama teacher. And then after the university experience, I was like, I don't want to do any of that. So I took a year off after university, and then I had some friends in university that were in communications, and they were making little films, like on film, and they always wanted me to be in them. So I was always around for that. But then they'd say like, "Hey, you want to see how like the editing and stuff works?" And it was just really cool, and it kind of stuck in my mind for that year that I was done university. And then I was just one day like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna go to film school," and like packed up my life on the West Coast and went to Thunder Bay to the college program there, which was like Ryerson's 4 year program condensed into 2 years. But then after the first year, I my professors encouraged me to take the Canadian Screen Training Institute's summer program in Ottawa. And so I applied, but I wanted to be a director, and obviously everyone wants to be a director because everyone seems to think it's easy, or that they're in charge. And then so the only thing I could get into, because all those programs were full, was advanced production, which I had to write a letter to the professor and just explain like basically bullshit what I knew about making stuff. And I got in, and I was the youngest one in that class. It was pretty much all like industry experienced people, except for me. And I didn't have any filter, and I don't know if I still do. But uh, yeah, I guess I said the right things and impressed the prof, because she was actually the head of creative affairs for a really big TV company in Montreal at the time. So at the end of the week, she's like, "You want a job?" And I was like, "I got to go back to school." And she's like, "That's a dumb idea." So I called my professors, and they're like, "She's right. It's a dumb idea. Go get a job." I think they also wanted to get rid of me. um, so yeah, through the CMPTA mentorship program, I got hired at a company called Telescene that they did a lot of kids TV, but they did a lot of drama as well. Like factual and lifestyle hadn't really like become a thing yet. And they just launched this pilot program with the Action Adventure Network, which back then was like satellite television. And they had to do 10 action pilots for 10 series. And every one of them was with like a major Hollywood director. So to me, it was really cool because I'm like, I'm going to be in creative affairs and I'm going to be around all these awesome people. And I got there and I was making coffee and copies and doing FedEx shipments. And some of the pilots didn't go and they didn't have as much work for me. So they asked me if I wanted to work in post, which at that point I'd moved to Montreal. So I was like, I'll do anything because I have bills to pay. And I worked the night shift back then, what we called digitizing, where you took like a beta tape and you like put it in the machine and it ingested it into the computer. And it was very slow and laborious work. But the company on the same floor that they had all their post-production, they also stored all their files. And I working the night shift, you'd put that tape in, it would run for 30 to 75 minutes, and you didn't do anything. It's not like you sat there and watched dailies from these shows. I did for a little bit because I was like, oh, what are they doing? And then I was like, oh, wow, this is boring watching them do the same thing over and over again because I'm never going to touch it creatively. So I started going through their filing cabinets and by date and just seeing how projects like started to finish through the paperwork. And that was kind of my like producing education.
And so okay, I was like, this is so cool. It's so cool, right? Because I think so many people that I've talked to in this industry have stories like this, where there is quote unquote formal education to become part of this industry. But unlike a lot of other industries where you need formal education, you need the certificate, you need the license to be like, I am now a cop, I'm now a doctor, I'm now a lawyer, I may do this. Where so many people in this entertainment industry, it feels like this is the story. Yeah, there's formal education, but at 3 a.m. you're getting your education looking through filing cabinets. Like, how does that, like, is that just you, the type of person to be like, I'm going to pursue this and I have that gumption? Or did you learn from mentors? How does that all work?
I mean, then I was just bored because I didn't have a library card and I couldn't even afford to buy a book. And I think I'd already read like the few books they had in the office anyway. So yeah, it was just one night I was like snooping around. I was like, oh, what's it? I think I was going through other people's desk drawers too. It's either looking for food or cigarettes. And then I was like, oh, there's a filing cabinet. And wow, there's a lot of filing cabinets. And I opened one and I was like, oh, this is that project they're just finishing up. And yeah, it's just like read. Because even though it was a company in Quebec, they were making English language television for the rest of the world. So all the contracts and all the scripts and everything was in English. So it's not like I was translating everything in my head. But no, is there? And then I just kind of from there. I don't know who put me in touch with the folks from Zaboomafoo, but I got a call to work on that show after my contract was done at Telescene, and that was kind of it's like a game changer only because all of a sudden you had like a credit, and I started as a what was called a wildlife footage coordinator, and because the show was like a third studio, a third running around brothers, and another third of it was just all stock footage. But back then, like stock footage libraries didn't really exist, so these guys like purchased stuff from photographers, and they just needed to know when they wrote the scripts, does this exist in our database, and otherwise, where can we get it? And then they had these little things called animal helpers, and just the producer Cheryl just one day was like, "Hey, do you want to direct one of these?" And I was like, "Okay." And I think the thing from film school that I took away was that it was just all like by hook or by crook. Like you just had to jump in and do everything. Like I still didn't really know like the full process that like other people did stuff. It was just like you do everything. So I did start doing everything for these little vignettes with kids, and then my education, drama and education, working with kids, kind of helped with that. And they, like, between her and the production manager and an AD and a really cool cameraman who didn't speak any English, and I didn't really speak any French, so we just communicated through intonation and swear words, which was a lot of fun. But I didn't really have a mentor for a while. I was just kind of like figuring it out. And then because I'd done all those little things, and then I was working at another TV company, they were starting to do this really cool hidden camera show. And I'd been around Montreal seeing all this stuff happen. And like, I'd sit down on a park bench sometimes and just watch Just for Laughs shoot gags. And it was a lot of fun. And I was like, I could do that. So they had this show coming up that needed kind of what I was doing on Zaboomafoo with the animal helper stuff. They needed these things called the ninja gags. And so I went out with two friends that were gymnasts, and I like made costumes for them, and I built props, and we went out and shot this little gag with the two ninjas, and then I gave it to the producer who had created the show, David Hansen, and he was just like, "What the hell?" I was like, "I don't know. I don't have a reel, so I figured I should do something to show you I could do this." And he's like, "Yeah, you got the job." So I started doing those, and it was a hard show because it was a bunch of people from the West Coast coming to Montreal to do gags where they wanted to do it one way, but Montreal is like really good at doing hidden cameras. So there was not a conflict, but there was just like some growing pains as they started. And then by around episode 4 or so, I'd done I was already ahead many episodes on these gags, and Dave was really liking them. He's like, "Do you want to do one of the episodes?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to." And then, typical Casey fashion, I just jumped in and like threw everything in. Like, I didn't know that you like got paid for a set amount of prep and a set amount of days, and then you were done. To me, it was like I'm on the job, and I just prep. So when it came time to like shooting stuff, I was like over prepped, and everyone knew the plan. And anyway, I did. I think it was episode 5, and we convinced this kid that he'd like unearthed dinosaur eggs, and one of them hatched, and then the mother was coming for it, and we like went full out. And the show was like super low budget. I think it was like $90,000 an episode. But knowing that like being I guess a student of film and stuff, I had the Jurassic Park special edition anniversary that had all the like making of stuff, so I like pulled things from there. And then I was like, how the hell are we going to convince a kid that like a dinosaur is like coming through the forest? So we rented the biggest like PA speakers we could get for, I think it was like we could only afford them for like 4 hours, and like the rental company was like waiting in the parking lot, and we put them on cinder blocks facing the ground, and then had the tone of like so we literally shook the earth. And then a couple of PAs had like ropes tied to trees and were shaking the trees, and this kid pissed himself, like
Oh
legit.
God, it's so
We
mean.
never showed it in the cut, but he ran away from the set screaming, "I want my mommy." And all that was on camera. And then so when they finally put the thing together, and Dave saw my episode, he's like, "You get every other episode for this for the season." And I was like, "What?" And it was a lot of work, but it was so much fun because they gave me a sandbox that was very small, but they allowed me to fill it with as much sand as I could like manage, and just get higher and higher. And no idea was too crazy. It just came down to like, as long as you can do it for the money we have. And there were times too then when I was like, well, I'm going to spend $50 on this because I really want to do this gag, or I want to try this thing. And yeah, and it just got better and better and better. And then I got the attention of the producers of Marvel Media in Toronto. And at the time, my girlfriend was being relocated to Toronto from her bank job. And I was like, I'm going to go and see what Toronto's all about. And yeah, and then just from there, my TV career kicked off, where I just worked nonstop for like 3 or 4 years. And then I remembered I went to film school and I made an incredibly, I don't know if it was naive or stupid or insane decision to like, I'm going to make movies. Um, so yeah, so it's like hitting the reset button, starting all over after like a 8, 9 year successful career. I didn't walk away from it, but I was like, I'm just not going to take these jobs. I'm going to try and do this stuff.
What is the difference between, like, what was that big switch that you had to make between TV and film? How is it different? Is it completely different? Did you have to re-educate yourself? How did that work for you?
Uh, I mean, then storytelling, but it the tools and stuff that exist now kind of changed the landscape. Back then, like we were still trying to shoot on film, digital. I think by the time I got my first movie going, digital was a thing, but at that point, it wasn't really like accessible to indie filmmakers until the Red camera came along. But you still had to tell a story, and you know, I was telling a story in 26 minutes for the longest time, and I did a short film which was like same thing, a lot of work, but like told a story in 10 minutes. And then going long form and like stretching the narrative out and arcing everything and gags and stunts and special effects, which I was used to, but like on like a very small scale. But the one thing back then, no one in Canada would teach you how to make movies because there's all of these grants and subsidies and tax credits and stuff, and it was just not part of anyone's education. You had to kind of, um, for lack of a better term, figure it out, or be a director that like the person who knew the information wanted to back, and then they would do it for you. And I was not that person, so um, being the being I don't know, being the performer, I put on the like I'm a dumb young filmmaker face, and I called a lot of these producers and like said, "Can I take you for your lunch and just ask you questions about how to do this?" And most of them, I think, were like, "Yeah, okay," because it's free lunch or like but they'd usually book me out like 3 months, thinking maybe I'd forget about it or maybe I'd cancel. But I would be the week before, I'd be calling their assistants, going like, "We got lunch, got this time." And usually I had to like save up to go to lunch with some of these people because it wasn't cheap. But for the most part, most of them were like incredibly generous, not in their details because it was all close guarded secrets on like how the sauce is made. But I just kind of like over time pulled out what I needed and kind of got a project underway that when it was ready to go, like I got funding and I knew how to put the tax credits together. I knew how all these things came together, but I wanted to go direct it, obviously. So a friend of mine, John Griffith, he was leaving his bank job in tax credit financing and wanted to produce. And I was like, "Hey, do you want to do this with me?" And yeah, we jumped in like the pool together and like struggled through it. And the first movie was insane with what we pulled off. And even to the point where like we had all our financing pulled the second last week of prep. So John and I had to like sell everything we own. And I mean like everything we own to just to make payroll to finish the film, and it was like super stressful. But we knew we had something really special on our hands, and it would all work out in the end. And I think like with filmmaking, TV is it. Sorry, the dogs are playing. TV is we're in the golden age right now where like TV is like film and the
Mm-hmm.
storytelling and the capabilities and the worlds that they're creating, but that wasn't really a thing back then. And we knew we had something special. We knew we had something that had legs that would travel and be entertaining. And because of it, like we just knew we had to like buckle down. Whereas in TV, you don't like put everything on the line because it's a set structure, and the financing doesn't really fall out on episode 6. You're just kind of dragging these things across the line. Where TV is a very different like set structure, and like everything's a go before you go. Um, so that's kind of the thing I've learned, and it hasn't changed. Like films are still the exact same, where it's like you drag the carcass of the plan across the finish line, and hope you didn't have to compromise too much along the way.
Now, do you think The term gets thrown around a lot, the term gatekeeping these days, right? And you kind of mentioned it there about people keeping all these secrets close to the chest. And like, is that across the board global film, or is that just here in Canada where we're still kind of a baby industry, where we're like trying to learn how to compete with the juggernauts of LA and New York? Like, are people just so keeping it close to the chest because they're like, oh, it's a finite resource, there's only enough slices of pie to go around? Like, why is that the case?
I think the reality is like if you've got a credit card with a $10,000 limit and an iPhone and some friends with time, you can go make a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's the gatekeeping about making a movie is not a thing, in my opinion. Um, the gate is that. Can you hear that squeaking a
Oh
lot?
yeah.
I'm gonna let them out. Outside, you two. Come on, out you go. Sorry about that.
It's
The
okay. Don't worry.
the I think the gatekeeping comes from not so much financing, but like the market itself is a very fickle beast, and you're constantly you're making something right now to sell in over a year, and there's no way to really fully gauge what the value and success will be while you're financing it, making it right now at a value that could be tremendously higher, tremendously less later on. So what I think a lot of people just don't understand is that they're like, oh, well, I put this together and I need this much money, and you should give me the money to make my movie. And the market dictates that, not you. Not it, we're not an industry where like we're making an iPhone and we know that this iPhone has all of these parts in it and they cost this much money, and we buy them for $10 and we assemble them for $100 and then we sell it for $2,000, and then we that's a set cost of things. Whereas like film, we put a budget together and we say, well, this is what the script cost, and then not the purchase of the script, but like to make this script, this is what it cost. But then you go out to the marketplace with the pieces you have and say, is it worth that?
Hmm.
And not always did it. Sometimes it's worth way more. A lot of times it's not. And then you get in the tricky part of like adjusting your creative to get your the cost down to get the financing in a spot where you can make the thing. And but then we make these like 500,000 to $50 million movies, and then we sell them for $20. And whereas like this gets sold at a profit right away, it's a different beast down the end of what our product is. So um, is there gatekeeping to filmmaking? No. No, not at all. I have many, many friends that just pull up their socks and go do it. And they've become, the more they've done that, the more movies they've made, the more successful they become. And then doing that over time, not losing anyone's money, making sure you're making something that is good and not just like good enough. Like you have to look at everything that's out there and make sure it's better, or at least on that same level. And then the money isn't really as much of a factor. You need some money to pull it off. You need to pay people something. You need to pay for gear unless you own it all. You need to eat. Um, but it's the larger projects that need like hundreds of thousands, if not multiple millions of dollars. That it's not so much a gatekeeping, because you can, if you're smart and you have a plan, you can access all those people because they all want to make money. But you have to do it. It's very rare that you're going to find someone who is like, here's my great idea. And they're like, we like your great idea. We will go make your movie. They want to see that you've had 10 other great ideas and they've been moderately successful. And then they'll look to start putting the time in, because the time commitment into making a film is, I don't think anyone ever fathoms like what it takes and how much it takes. And when people commit to doing that thing, it's like it's a big commitment. In some cases, it's like many years of your life, from like starting the idea to putting it on the screen, and the efforts to finance and the ups and downs and the pauses, and then it goes, and then it sits on a shelf, and then it gets picked up, and it's just it eats so much time. And then I guess that, to your point about gatekeeping too, like the only thing money really buys you in this industry is time.
Hmm.
That's it. It's the time to do things. So if you don't have any money, find the time and find a creative solution to not spend a whole, like if you got no money, don't write a script with a whole bunch of car chases and action sequences that you most likely can't shoot. So
Hmm.
at least safely. So
So, correct me if I'm wrong, you work in the realm of director and producer, and both kind of coming together a lot of the time. Yes, having
and
to do
unfortunately, I
both.
mean,
Yeah.
I never sought out to become a producer. There was no like, even though I did that summer course so long ago, I think I just became a producer out of necessity.
Mm.
Because I'd had some people that were like, "Yeah, I'll produce for you," and then I sat there for a year or two where like nothing happened.
Hmm.
Um, and it was just like, well, I guess I'll just have to go do it. Um, and then I saw other like really creative people, like directors that I like admired. That is like, oh, well, if I don't do this, someone else isn't going to do it for them. Like I just saw myself in their position back when I was doing my first one, and it's like, okay, well, I'll help. Let's do it. And that's kind of how I've gauged a lot of like my producing choices, I guess, are like, do I like this person? Do I want to, or these people, or do I want to spend the next X amount of months or years of my life around them, essentially working for them to like support their vision, but also because this is a business, like keeping people in check when it comes to spending money and resources and um, keeping egos in check, even my own, which is very hard to do sometimes. And yeah, it just was not something I wanted to do. And I think in the last couple of years, I've been getting away more from it. Like I do still have some projects with um, directors that I like incredibly admire, and I'm still trying with my partners to make these movies, but it's not getting any easier right now. If anything, it's getting like post COVID with the inflation, everything's gotten more expensive, and it's not like there's more money for us to make stuff. So it's tricky.
Hmm. And so, what do you do to stay motivated in an industry that can be so fickle and creatively frustrating?
I don't know if I can do anything else anymore. So I think the like sheer and utter terror of living on the street or um, I don't know, living in a basement apartment and working at a truck stop. And that's not to shit on anyone that works at truck stops. I guess I've done this for so long that I just don't know what else could do. But the funny thing is, so it just you just can't be afraid of failure because you're going to fail every step of the way. But it's knowing that like you just got to keep trying. You just have to keep pushing. You have to keep going, and that's really what just keeps me motivated. Is that I I love art. I look back as far as I can in my life, and that's always been a part of my life. And I wanted to create, and I wanted to be around other artists, and I wanted to. Um, I don't want necessarily leave a legacy, but I wanted to have like in my twilight years look back and be like, I'm proud of this all this stuff. And there's some stuff I know I won't be proud of, but so I guess that's what keeps me going. Like the money is by no means the motivation, and I learned pretty early on if that's like your drive, then you might be very successful because for some people that is a good motivator. But I've not always seen the most amazing art created out of sheer commerce.
Hmm.
So you can't have that like aside from like I need to pay my bills as a motivation. There's no like I'm going to get rich motivation by any means.
So, do you have any advice for anyone who's interested in getting into filmmaking, directing, producing, anything like
I mean, it's advice that I've gotten all along. It's like keep your overhead low. Um, write what you can make and write from what you know because then it's honest. and then look at what your access is to money or talent or people that might give you a leg up. But if you don't have any of those things, like, I don't know, uh, sell the stuff you have in your life that you don't need or want. Put that money, that's your budget, that's your script. I'm sure if you can't shoot it yourself, you got a friend who wants something on their reel. I'm sure you know some actors, if not go to like community theater, or put an ad on Craigslist. Is that still a thing? Craigslist? Facebook, probably a Facebook group you could put it on, and just go make the movie. It's just go make it. People always ask me that they say like I want to be a writer. I'm like, then just write. Like the only way to be a writer is just write. And I think the only way to be a filmmaker, you can take several paths to get there, but at the end of the day, the only way you can call yourself a filmmaker is if you make films. If you, in film school, they said you shouldn't call yourself a filmmaker until you've made three things. And I think that I never, I would call myself a producer, I'd call myself a director, but it wasn't until I made three movies that I called myself a filmmaker. And sometimes even that sounds pretentious as fuck.
It's funny, this reminded me, I'm taking a producing course, right? As we do, because nobody teaches us how to be producers. And the first thing that this producing course said was producing is arts adjacent. Being an actor is being an artist. Being a director is being an artist. Being a producer is adjacent to the artist. So you don't have to be good at it, you just have to be competent. And done is better than perfect. And I thought that was just so interesting. I would love your thoughts as a creative artist director, but also a producer. That like you don't gotta be good, you just gotta be confident and just get it done.
I mean, done is a good, like, just finishing things as a producer is very valuable. It looks like I have like a giant creature behind me. She is giant. Nothing's ever perfect, and I think as Steven Spielberg said, and I sound just pretentious as fuck going, maybe it was Steven Spielberg who said, but it's true. Films aren't finished; they're abandoned, and you have to work to a point of like it being done. And those deadlines, like some people you hear like they made their own movie and it took them 3 years because they just got caught in a loop making it perfect. And that's great because that means you didn't have money, you had time, and you can strive for what's perfect to you or close enough. But a lot of times, like we had, like especially in Canada, like the money hits your bank account through the financial system that we network of like how we put money together here, and then it's like, okay, you got 6 weeks of prep, you got 3 to 4 weeks of shoot, you've got 3 months to post the whole thing, and it's got to be out because you're bearing interest on loans. So yes, I make horror movies, and this is where most of my the sounds of creatures come from.
Hey, write what you know, like you said.
Yeah. So, but producing is like at the end of the day, it's about getting it done. And there's an art to producing, and I know some producers who are fucking Picasso with the budget. So, let's just give everyone a little glimpse of what the hell's going on behind me.
For those of you listening, we're watching Casey's two adorable dogs fight. I love dogs on this show. There's always so many animals everywhere.
That's good.
The best.
So I'll keep them kind of on screen because that's one of those rules. Like if you can see it, you can hear it. Otherwise, it's just some weird thing going on in the background. But yes, to your point, like done is a producer. Done and on budget are the first two things, and then I would add safely to that. And then you want to have over top of those three, though, at all times, remembering the art, because you are there as a producer to be fiscally responsible to whoever's given you the money, even if it's just come out of your own pocket. But you're also responsible to the artists who are trying to create something, and if you're not supportive of them, it's like, what's the point? Because then there's a lot of bad movies made because people forget that. Like One group is just trying to get it made. The other is trying to make something good. And sometimes they're diametrically opposed. And I've been around those projects. I don't think I've ever been a part of one per se, because we always just try and put as much as we can on screen. Especially later on in the production process when you're like nearing the end, and if you still have money, you're like, how do we make this better? How do we spend that money? And then sometimes it's like we're out of money, but how do we protect the vision to get to the end? But a lot of times producers who are like in it for the paycheck and know are competent in making the movies don't necessarily care if it's any good, because they're getting paid to make the movie, not necessarily being financially successful if the movie's successful.
It's interesting because I think about this, that makes me think of the healthcare system when you have so many opposing goals, right? If your goal is to just get all the operations done and have as many patients come through as possible because your wait list is so long, the doctor, versus like, I am there for my 12-hour shift and I don't really care what happens. 0 patients, 10 patients, doesn't matter to me. I'm here. Everyone else in the healthcare system. It's really hard when you have two differing goals to try and meet together.
Yes. And I think when I'm producing, even with partners, and I'm also directing, it's a great balance, because I completely understand the fiscal responsibilities and what needs to happen, but at the same time, I can then turn my creative brain to what I'm trying to accomplish artistically, and with my collaborators go, well, we have this financial problem. I'm not the type of director who'd be like, well, it's not my fucking problem, you figure it out, producer. Or like, no, we all need to figure this out in support of the project and it being as good as possible. And those compromises sometimes is like, how do we a compromise if it still achieves the same goal, maybe not as lofty in the little one is really fighting the big one this morning.
If you want these sound effects for your next horror film, just let
You
me know.
have them?
I'll send you the recordings.
Please do. There's a creature in this. They're showing off today.
I love it.
Where were we? The lofty goals, you can compromise and still achieve something that like the audience may never know the bullshit and the stuff that you need to go to get to that, and half the time they actually don't, whether like, because that's the magic, we're illusionists, but sometimes when a producer is like, well, we're so far off and the creator and director are so far off, that space in the middle, that divide does get felt by an audience, because you're just like, that never seemed to work out. And that, I think that happens actually more often than not, to be very honest.
I guess closing that divide, is that more of building a community of people around you, like people that you like to work with, or how do you do that? Excuse me.
It's how I do it. I think sometimes though I've seen projects where like the production team brought their team, the creative team brought their team, and not everyone gelled cohesively, and then it creates a divide where both sides are making a different movie, and they don't even realize it sometimes. But I think it's like bringing everyone together to discuss what the whole goal is. It's not because the goal is making a film, but what is it, and what is achievable, and where are the points? Like I just want everyone's ideas, and I don't mean the like. I ask everyone to think deeply about their ideas before they bring them to me, because I'm loaded with them all the time. Don't be like, oh, wouldn't it great if that was blue instead of pink? And be like, okay, but like, don't come to me with like something that's a ton of work that's just it's just like a personal taste. That's the thing where as a director you're like feeding through, you're the gatekeeper of ideas. But I would be remiss to ever prevent anyone from actors to any of my HODs, that's heads of department, to not come to me with an idea to make what we're doing better. And sometimes it's that I tell them, don't come to me with problems, come to me with problems and the solution to the problem, a creative solution that still if it gets me close enough to what I want, I'm probably going to be okay with it, because it usually means like we're out of time or we're low on money, or we couldn't find an item, or someone didn't show up to work. There's a multitude. Everything in film at all times is striving to make you fail. So it's constantly weighing that out. So the best idea always moves forward.
I would love to chat a bit more. You kind of mentioned a little bit there about actors, just because my podcast, vast majority of my listeners are actors who have started into this industry later on in life. Mm-hmm. How can actors make your job as both a director and a producer easier?
I mean, as a producer, I could say that if you are self-represented, do your reading. If you're SAG, know the SAG rules. If you're actor, know the actor rules. It's going to make my life easier, but it also means that if like someone other than me is not going to take advantage of you. Mm. If you have a agent or manager, just make sure that they, as much as they're looking out for your best interest, make sure they're not shitty. Because the carry down is if you have an agent or a manager that is really not fun to work with, and it's business, it's a negotiation, but if they're not like a good person to interact with, that will transfer to you. My opinion of you will be affected by. But as a director, I'd say just come prepared. Don't just know your lines, know the lines all around you. Know your pages, and if you don't understand the scene, especially if you're only in for a day or two, if you don't understand the scene because you think it has ties to other scenes, ask for more pages and know it. So, because rehearsals are they're a luxury of time that we don't always get. And we'll get a rehearsal on the day, but the full page turners and getting in the room or the spaces together for hours on end or even days isn't always possible. And in some cases, a luxury. I would prefer to rehearse much, much more often, but sometimes I'm dealing with actors that are literally on every continent before they land with me, and we just have to go. So I meet with them in advance and I just say, just know it, just know the whole script, know everyone's lines, know everyone's arc, know everyone's character, not to the sense that you're going to perform them, but you know what is going on, because then your character, your lines, your everything will just be so spot on. And I say that too with auditions. Read, practice, and just know those things, and then record. It's not like back in the day, I'd have to sit in a room and you'd come in and you'd get your one shot at it, and then that would be it. But nowadays, everyone has to self-tape, especially post-COVID. And I say, if you do it 100 times until you get it nailed, where you're that's my best take, that's the one I'm going to see, and that's the one that's totally going to be the thing I judge it on. Not I'm just going to do it once or twice and send it out, because it's your opportunity to shine. It really is. And as much as it's really competitive being a director, unless you're an actor who's a writer or a director or producer, it's your talent and your ability or your tenaciousness is the only thing that's going to give you the leg up over every other actor. Whereas, because you can't go in the room and create that opportunity unless to create that opportunity is to perform. And I've always said that an actor's job is not to act. It's not to show up on set on time. It's not to know their lines yet. Their very, very, very first job is to audition. And that, until you are in a state in your career where you are just getting offers and you're not auditioning, your number one job is to audition, and that should be the thing you do the best every time to then go on to the next thing. So It's a lot of stupid pressure. I do not envy. I mean, there was a time very, very, very early on in my career that I skipped over my little intro story to you where I was acting and I was auditioning and I was getting roles. And then those roles all went away because like movies moved to different towns or different countries or the directors were changed, the studios. Yeah. And like there were times where like, oh my God, my dream's coming true because like I'm going to be opposite Harrison Ford for the next month. And then doesn't happen, or Johnny Depp for a week doesn't happen, and I reached a point where I was like, I have no control over any of this, and it's nauseating to me. So I was like, I'm gonna go work behind and try and like create and manifest because then if I ever wind up in front of the camera, and I mean, I'm not getting any prettier, so it's it's probably not going to happen, and I think I like parted ways with that idea a long time ago, but. It is just audition, audition, audition. And when I was in that I used to get five or six different friends to read with me beforehand, just so I had different people to rehearse off of because I knew every reader was going to give me something different.
Hmm.
And there were times where I'd go in, I'd ask for the late tapings like when I had to go in for my audition in the casting director's studio. Usually because I could like they would be tired and I could be a fly on the wall. I'd show up a little earlier and then I'd like hear conversations, or sometimes someone would be like working on the tapes and I could see other people's auditions. And it's all cheeky. It's just stealing, right? But it's the
You're looking
advantage.
through the filing cabinet again.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like what's the advantage? Because
Yeah.
it is competitive. And I think sometimes like in the arts, because you're not, if you're a painter you paint, and if you're a musician you like play, you can like record music at home and create your thing without anyone's permission. But like film and television, you almost every step of the way you need permission to like work in the industry from some level, unless you decide I'm going to take my credit card and my iPhone and my dog and I'm gonna go make a movie, and then you don't need permission from anyone. Um, that's the only other way. So to actors, I just say like just be. Everyone says be prepared, but I'm like be overly prepared. It's like in theater school they'd have like all the different theater exercises where you're like, okay, now do it like you're underwater, now do it like you're standing on your head, now do it like you're climbing a tree. That all was designed to for your muscle to work harder and harder in different ways and to sink it in, because the more you do it in different ways, the more it becomes like instinct,
Mm.
and then um, you just it becomes so much more natural when you're like doing your audition, or you're on stage. So I think if like actors, especially if they've come to it late in life, I'd also say like go take every bloody class you possibly can. And it's not so much for education, it's for practice. The education comes with the practice, but it's just like you practice your craft, practice, 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 practice. Because if you love it too, you're going to enjoy that. And you'll quickly find out if you don't like the practice and the theater games and the doing monologues and all that stuff, you probably shouldn't be doing this because that's like there has to be a joy there. Like I love directing. I love the prep. I love the coming up with the plan. I love executing the plan. I love being in post. Um, so when I'm like trying to find motivation on getting through the struggles of making this stuff, I just remind myself like how much I love it when I get to do it. So but there's no like class where director can goes out and just like, oh, we're just gonna make a movie to practice. But you can do that as an actor. You can go out and like go do theater if your phone's not ringing off the hook for auditions. Audition for theater because there's more theater out there than there is television and movies being made. So especially right now. And quite frankly, like I think theater actors, because it's so raw and exposed, always brings something uh, to a film or television where like they're their performances are just, there's a honesty and a realism to them, and I guess that's also why like all the greats back in the day, uh, like in the 50s and 60s, they were all like huge theater people, and I even think now today, like any big actors doing some sort of theater work in their downtime.
You mentioned your parents early on in your story. How would they or your other loved ones, anyone in your life, how would they describe what you do for a living?
I mean, it was only a couple years ago that my parents stopped asking what Plan B is.
Oh no.
So, um, I mean, I don't ever try and explain what I do to people that aren't in the industry, because it sometimes it hurts people's brain because our business doesn't make any sense in a traditional business model sense unless you're like a lender, or you rent things or you provide a service. That's a business within the business, but the business itself and how to get things done and how you survive and how you thrive or how you keep yourself mentally afloat is all stuff that's like scary to people outside of what we do. So I try not to scare my loved ones very often. I know they're scared regardless because they all think I'm crazy. So it's nice though because we've reached a point where like I everyone used to be so like curious and excited and wanted to like know all the stuff that was going on. I talk about it a bit, but then it's a difficult job, and quite frankly, like when I'm around my family, I would like to not think about work.
Mm.
So they've got to like if I have something to talk about, I will. But a lot of times I kind of just want to be like in like I love the decompression when I'm around my family. I love being excited about their lives. Um, and yeah, and hopefully like through my process I get to make something that then they watch and then they're entertained and it like excites them too. But yeah, I know my parents are proud of me. I was doing my first film, and it was our first night shoot, and it was the intro to the movie. And there's like 80 zombies in makeup, and we're down a dirt road, off a path, down a hill where we've set up this whole carnival scene that had been decimated by a zombie attack. And it's a big set. And I think we had 120 people that night, and most of the time we had 40 people making the movie. But so this is big, and it was the time in my parents' schedule where they're like, "We're gonna go come see what you do." So it couldn't have been better because like for 15 years before that, they would have just shown up to like me, a cameraman, a PA, and an actor like in a minivan making stuff. So they showed up to like the biggest day of my career. And I think that, and my dad loved that he could get a coffee from the truck. And my mom was just fascinated by like everyone wanted to know everyone's jobs and what they're doing. And everyone was so lovely that they like took the 5 minutes to be like, I do this and this, how I'm part of. So like they got their education of like how it worked. Um, then my parents like stuck around until it was too late for them. And then they went to bed. And then we shot all night, and then I absolutely love my crew, and it's only in the last few years I've actually had to change this. But I used to be first on set. I'd lug cable. I'd help move things until I was needed in director mode to then be working with everyone as a director. And then when the cast went home and there was no more meetings with me as a director, I would then turn and start pulling cable and moving gear with the crew, because everyone was like doing it for me. And so that particular night, I stayed up and because we had like a million miles of Jenny cable, we had to get out of the bush for shooting this far because it was, I still don't even know why we chose that location so far. Anyway, we pulled up and we went back to our hotel, and the sun's been up probably for like 4 hours at this point, and the all the crew is like we're having drinks on the back of the truck because like we did it, like that was absolutely insane, and most of them are like patting me on the back because they're like thank you for helping us because like even that extra set of hands shaves like a half hour to an hour off everyone's time. And I've probably had two or three drinks, but I'm like exhausted because I've been up for like probably 30 hours at that point, and I'm ready to go to bed. And I see my dad coming out of the restaurant with a coffee. And I'm like, I'm going to go say good night, good morning to him. And he gave me a big hug and he said, I'm really proud of you. And that was it's not that he never was before, but I think it was the only time he ever saw how fucking insane it is what we do. And it was just enough for him to be like, I don't need to know anymore. I've seen like they're all here for you to do this thing and all of this craziness and there's explosions and gunfire and people in makeup and there's free coffee and it to him it was like yeah you're doing great, keep it up. So
That's lovely. Do you have anything you are looking forward to coming up?
I'm looking forward to seeing how well you edit this interview because I just ramble and I'm like you've asked like six questions and I've just been blah 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 blah.
Hey, you know what? I'm over 150 episodes in, and if I've learned one thing, it's for me to shut my mouth and let the guest talk, because it's pure gold coming out of your mouth.
Ramble ramble ramble.
Yep, pure gold.
I've had a film for about 11 years. I guess like a quarter of my life and half my career that it always just feels like it's just out of grasp, but it feels like my fingertips are touching it right now. So we'll see. But there's also I've kind of gone back in my career where I've I was looking for the longest time to find something where kids and horror or genre came together, and I've had one for a couple of years that now has like received the financing and it's set to go next summer, and I'm starting to let myself get excited about that one because again, I've already done a considerable amount of work and prep and development and everything, but so many times you like at the starting line in this industry, they're just like, "Excuse me, we're going to take that rug." And so a friend of mine once said, "It's like I don't think it's a go until I'm on set with a breakfast burrito calling action."
With
And I
that
was
free
like,
coffee in hand.
"Yeah,
Free.
yeah." It's like, okay, it's real now. Um, but yeah, I'm starting to let myself get a little excited about that, and I'm excited to just see what happens in the industry over the next little bit because it's been pretty disastrous. I think people like blame COVID, but actually COVID was really good for the business when it was happening. Like a lot of people thrived and a lot of young people got worked in because there was just so much work that they like the opportunities were there, but things have retracted so much. And this is not the first time I've seen it in my career, but I've seen changes that and I think there's a lot of voids that I'm curious to see get filled. Like nature abhors a vacuum, so it's something's gonna happen here, and then and it's exciting because I know a lot of people they're like lamenting about AI, and I don't think AI is ever going to like replace all of us because there's a certain imperfection to what we do that is necessary. And anytime anything is completely like computer generated, like there's even like there's mistakes built into the Pixar work, even though it's
Mm-hmm.
masterful filmmaking through animation. There's still stuff built in there to give it that realism, even though it's an animation. And I don't think machine learning will ever really grasp that. So I'm not worried about AI. If anything, I'm excited about AI because it's giving us tools to um, help us collaborate more and help us be more creative and help us share ideas and help us try things out where we'd never like be able to have the resources because that's the thing that's becoming harder and harder in indie space is resources. So I'm excited to see where that goes.
Do you have any final words of wisdom or advice?
If you ever feel like it's not for you, quit and do something else. if you're doing this and that's, I mean, they're trying to leave with something positive here, but like this is really fucking hard. And if you don't love it, it if it's not like in you to create or help create or support the creation, and then get out, go do something else. I've had some friends leave the industry recently, and like I they're so happy.
Mm.
And we there's always this saying, we you only live once. I'm like, actually, you only die once. You live every day, and if you're not living and you're not finding reason to be happy, and what you do every day makes you miserable, um, odds are you should do something else. And I say that to anyone in this industry, like, in if you stick out the first 2 years, you'll start making some money. And if you stick out another 5 years, like you got a career. But around that like 5 to 10 year mark, if you aren't still absolutely in love with this for the rest of your life, look at what else you can do. And you're not failing, you're making a choice to make yourself happy and go do something else with the time you have on this planet. So I think that's kind of my encouragement more and more today than like just write or find a rich uncle to fund your movie. Like if you're gonna do it, do it. But I think the as I get older, I realize like I do derive a lot of happiness, even though this from what I do, even though it also makes me miserable so often. But that I know is what keeps me going is how much I love this art. And if you love it, do it. And I mean like you're okay with the pain. You love it so much you're okay with the pain that it brings. But if you're not in the struggle that is filmmaking, no matter what level you're at, whether you are a producer or an actor or a director or you're a cinematographer or you're working in the camera department or you're working in the art department, you're working in the construction department. If you don't can't pass that litmus test of do I love this and I do want to do it for the rest of my life, uh, don't do something else. You'll have a much better life.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And thank you, Casey, for being my guest this week. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share your story, share your insights into this crazy film industry with me and with my guests. I so appreciate you and your incredible talent. Oh, thank you. And I hope you all will tune in next week for another episode of Second Act Actors. Bye.